I'm Maddie with Maddie Sews, and thanks for hanging with me, you all. So I recently made myself the Lotte Hoodie by Sinclair Patterns, and you all, this is a really cute sweater. So I wanted to review it for you and give you all the details. I'm going to walk you through the pattern details, the description, the sizing, fabrics, and things to look out for. And then overall, my kind of thoughts on the entire sweater. So I guess with all of that being said, let's get right into it. The Sinclair Lotte Hoodie is actually a really great color blocked sweater option if you're trying to use up some of those scraps of fabric that you absolutely love, right? I mean, that's kind of why I made this one. I had a largish scrap piece of this fabric right here that I absolutely loved, and I wanted to use it, and I thought, well, this has a whole bunch of style lines that allows for some great color blocking options. This pattern does come with two different neck options. It comes with a fully lined hoodie or a lined cowl. Now the hoodie is actually asymmetric, and it has the ties over on the side here, which I actually think is a really fun and cool detail. I mean, it's really different. In my opinion, the cowl isn't as cool as that hoodie. It doesn't have the wraparound feature. It's just literally a really long tube that you sew on to your sweater, and then you fold it over. And so you can see here that I actually put my ties and my holes for the ties on the inside, the lining part, so that way when it folds over you can see the ties and they're not dangling from the underneath area. Now this pattern does come with instructions to include pockets in on the side. I decided to omit those because of the fabric that I chose, and I'll get into that in a second. And then there are two different cuff options that you could use. This is the regular cuff, and then they also have one of those thumb hole cuffs, which is really nice, especially for people who work out outside or are hiking and things like that. So I thought that those were some really nice options that came along with this pattern. This pattern is described as being beginner friendly. I actually disagree with that. If I had a friend who was learning how to sew, I would not tell them to sew this up because the grommets on the actual hoodie or the cowl neckline could give you some, well, it could be really difficult. The tutorials that I've seen out there are really good at walking you through it, but if you were just reading the directions, I don't think that it would be really intuitive for a beginner person to pick up and kind of go through on their own. I also think that because the front center panel, this one right here that I made in pink, because this one has the pocket option, that option requires 3 layers of fabric. And depending on the type of fabric that you use, I mean, it could really create a whole lot of bulk. And quite honestly, if you're a beginner sewist who is just kind of getting acquainted with the different weights of fabrics, I mean, that's gonna trip you up a bit if you've got something that's a little heavy. This pattern is designed for medium to heavyweight knits. And quite honestly, 3 layers of a heavyweight knit, in my opinion, is going to provide too much bulk around the midsection. I wouldn't do it. So now let's talk about the sizing. This pattern actually comes in petite, regular, or tall, which is really great, especially for the taller ladies who have really long arms. I mean, that's a really nice option to have. And the size chart on this sweater is really good. I'm going to read off the sizing for the bust, waist, and hips in both inches, and for people who aren't in the US, centimeters. So the bust range is from 31.5 inches to 59.8 inches, which is 80 centimeters up to 152. The waist is 23.6 inches up to 52.4 inches, which is 60 to 133 centimeters. And then for the hips, it starts at 33.9 inches and goes up to 63, which is the equivalent of 86 centimeters up to 160 centimeters. So it has a really nice wide range. in my opinion. The sizing does go from an extra, extra small up to a 4XL. The interesting thing about the sizing for this pattern is that the bust size increases as the sizing increases. So for the smaller sizes, it was your typical BC cup size. And then for the mid-size range, they went up to, I believe, a D cup size. And then for the larger ones, an even larger cup size, which I thought was really interesting because I had never really seen that before. And quite honestly, I have no opinion on it. For me personally, I always have to do an additional full bust adjustment, which is just because I have a really large bust. And so that's a standard adjustment that I'm going to have to do. And I don't expect many pattern companies to actually make that like in their standard sizing, if you understand what I'm saying. For this pattern though, because this is a new to me company, I decided to do the size 18 and I graded down to a size 20. I did find that the armholes were a bit too big for me. I mean, much larger than I appreciated, honestly. So the next time that I make this pattern, I will go down to a size 16 and then do a full bust adjustment. I would most likely, because this is a knit, just do kind of one of those cheater bust bubbles, but a small one, not a really big one, just a small cheater bust bubble. And then I would grade out to the size 20 to accommodate my hips again. One other reason why I would make that adjustment and actually go down is because the shoulder seams I felt actually came a little too far off of my shoulders. I'd prefer to have them in a little more, so I'll definitely go down to a size 16 for the top. Now let's talk about fabrics. So I had recently mentioned that this pattern calls for a medium to heavyweight fabric. Well, and that's pretty much what I've used. The Arete fabric right here, as well as this eggplant purplish color, both of these came from Green Style Creations. It's their high performance athletic knit, which is like an 80-20 like poly to spandex mix. And this is a high quality fabric. Because I didn't have enough of either of those to make the entire sweater, the entire back is out of that eggplant color, I decided to color block with another knit that I had in my stash. Now this pink right here is actually a scuba knit that I had in my stash, and it has a little bit of stretch. I mean, it doesn't stretch anywhere near as much as this fabric does, but it's fine because I believe that the stretch percentage for the fabric that's required to make this sweater falls in at about 30% four-way stretch, which is fine. I mean, this scuba has that. Now, if you've never worked with scuba, I would consider this fabric on the heavier side. And I mean, the fact that it's also double-sided kind of plays into that. Now, I have a little tiny swatch here to show you. But this is the scuba fabric, and it's pink on one side and brown on the other side. And so if you look at the edge there, you can tell that they basically just joined the two pieces of fabric onto each other. And so that's what made the double-sided scuba that I use. Because it is on the heavier side, I decided not to put pockets in my sweater because I didn't want all of the bulk. As I had mentioned earlier, the pockets does require that you cut 3 of these panels. Now, I mean, I could have went into my stash and cut 2 more panels of a lighter weight fabric, maybe even this mesh one. But quite honestly, I felt like digging into my stash fabric for that would still provide a bit more bulk than what I am used to. So I just decided to omit the pockets and sew the entire panels on straight. By the way, if you're finding this pattern review helpful, please give me a thumbs up because it really does help me out a lot. I also used that scuba fabric on the actual cowl neckline here, and you can see that it is pink on both sides. And that's because, well, I didn't want the brown to show because I just felt like the brown would have disrupted the color matching that I was going for. So I did line it with a super thin netting that I had picked up from G Street Fabrics. Although I really like the way the color blocking turned out in this top, I will admit that I feel like this heavy fabric is still a little too heavy for it. I mean, I do wish that the cowl was a little drapier than what it is. And honestly, I do wish that I would have had some pockets. For a project that used up my scraps, I think it's really beautiful and 100% acceptable. But if this were a project that I was planning to make because I really loved the pattern and wanted to do something to accommodate the pattern, I would definitely keep my knits to a medium weight. Now let's talk about some of the things that you're going to want to keep an eye out for when you're actually making this pattern. Now, although I don't think the actual instructions called for it in the material list, the tutorials that I saw, everyone was using a piece of vinyl or leather to install grommets on the hoodie or on the cowl right there. And I mean, I think that's okay. It's not my preferred look, so I didn't do it. Instead of doing that, I just made a couple of buttonholes that were large enough to accommodate my actual ties that I made using my fabric. And so that worked out nicely. Another thing that you're going to want to keep an eye out for some reason, and I don't know if this is just me, and it could have been, but I just knew that that cowl was going to be an asymmetric fold over and put in your cool little grommets or buttonholes over on the side. And that's just not the case. That's not how this cowl neck is designed. It is designed to be more straightforward. It's going to be in the front. Everything is lined up. So you're not going to get that really cool asymmetric look like you would with the hoodie. So when you're looking at all of the different pictures, whether it be on Instagram or on their website, just take note that when you're seeing those asymmetric ties coming down, that's the hoodie version. I don't think that their instructions actually made it clear that it was just going to be a tube, a standard tube that was not going to be asymmetric that kind of went onto your sweater. Now, perhaps that was me being a little dense, and I can own that. But I did have to cut off the first collar that I had put on there, cut a new one out of fabric again, and then reinsert it. And I actually went and I referenced a tutorial on YouTube by My Creative Room, where she's broken down all of the different steps to the Lotte hoodie. So if you're going to make this sweater and you're like, oh, but I really want to make this, but I am a beginner, follow My Creative Room's tutorial. It's actually really good and really comprehensive. I'm going to make sure that I link to it in the description box right down there, so that way you can find it really easily. And by the way, I'm going to put the links for the pattern and any fabrics that are available down there as well. Ultimately, I think that this sweater is really beautiful. I think that if you're willing to take the time to walk through each of the steps, you can get a real wonderful, wonderful product as well. And I do like the color blocking options. I will make this sweater again. I'm not sure if it'll be anytime soon, but I can definitely see myself adding more of these into my closet, especially because I am currently trying to sew through my stash, and I really don't want to keep any larger scraps kind of laying around. And this is a really good scrap buster. Overall, I like the sweater, and I would recommend it to other people to sew up. Absolutely. It looks great. If you found this pattern review helpful, check out this video right over here, which is actually my Green Style Creations Tempo Tights, which is the first time that I actually used my really fun Arete fabric. And you've all. Until next time, I sincerely hope that you find joy and have a wonderful day.